The talker. I used to be an extroverted person before this happened, and I visited many people and many parties. But even in my extroverted days, I had never gone to the forest. I grew up in the big cities where we don't have forests. We just have beaches filled with pretty women. The only thing close to a forest that I ever saw was where my cousin lived, and it was there that I first started to lose my extroversion. My cousin lived in this small neighborhood, which was quite a distance from the big cities, but she got a school at one of the big cities where I live, which to do well in, you must visit every day, but she couldn't afford to do that. So we decided that we would take her and she would come to live with me. My brother was sent to go pick her up, and I was so excited I went with two. She was my favorite cousin, after all. We got there in the early mornings of Saturday, and we were sure that my cousin hadn't woken up yet, so we had to wait. My brother was pretty annoyed I came along, so he was really sour, which I found boring, so I left the car to walk around the neighborhood. I walked around for a while before I saw a cluster of trees. I was curious and got the idea of swinging around the branches like a monkey, something I am suddenly aware sounds really stupid and impossible now, but it was a great idea to a 14-year-old girl. As I drew closer to the trees, I heard a sound like an orange being pressed, wet and squishy. I noticed there was a gorge there where the branches had fallen in as if someone had gone in, and the grass was crushed too, so they were dragging something. When I heard two people grunting, I immediately knew what was happening. I blushed and I realized I should probably turn and leave, but I was so curious. I decided to peek a little. So, I got on my knees and hands and started slowly peering around the bottom. Then things got quiet. I waited for them to continue and was deciding if I should peek again, when a man popped out of the top. His eyes were black, his hair balding, with his face furious. His eyes were especially terrifying to look at. I wanted to apologize, but then I smelled it. Blood. And on his chest and hands, there were blood splatters. I turned and ran, hearing the leaves behind me breaking, but I ran as fast as I could. When I met my brother, I told him what happened, and he would not believe me. No one would, and I didn't want to make a scene, so I remained silent about it. I probably wouldn't see him again anyway, I thought. Oh, but I did. When schools opened, I was excited going through our first day. But then, there he was. The man was the janitor. He saw me, and I tried not to make like I knew him, but I know he knows me. Later, as I was walking home, I turned and I saw him, following me. He never said anything, and every time I meet people, I always wanted to tell them about him, but no one would believe me. So now, I don't want to talk to people as much. The camper. This story happened to my brother and I. In fact, he is the one who suggested I tell this. I was 12 at the time, and my brother, who is usually a year younger than me, was about 10. So he thought maybe my memory would be stronger. We were living in a very unique neighborhood at that time. You see, we were living in the same house that my father grew up in when he was a child. He'd moved out of the town, and after getting married, he moved back to that house. This means that most of the people there are people who have known my father since they were children. Most of them are cool, and they take care of us if we are their children. One of these people was a man who we called Randy Runner, after Road Runner. Uncle Randy was the tallest man I've ever seen. He wears square glasses and is always seen wearing shorts and high socks, showing his hairy legs. And so, people started saying he had long legs like Road Runner, and the name kinda stuck, just to show the type of person he was. When he heard that nickname of his, I'd expected him to lose his mind. Instead, he laughed. That's the type of guy we are talking about here. a guy who was always smiling and always helpful to those in need, and just a general pleasure to be around, honestly. Now, let's talk about how effed up he actually was. Out of all the things in the world, the one thing that ever made Uncle Randy stop smiling was his backyard garden. To be more specific, it was when anyone tried going to see his backyard. It first happened when I was around 6 and Jason was 4 at the time, so he doesn't remember. What happened was the two of us were playing during one Oktoberfest. We were playing tag when he started whining about wanting to go to the bathroom. We were right in front of Uncle Randy's home, so we figured we could just run around the house. So we turned and ran to the side of the house. And then, audible throughout the entire festival, my uncle screamed, "Hey, where are you going?" The entire neighborhood got quiet, and Uncle Randy flew to us. He asked where we were going, and we said we were going to pee. He then asked if we ever heard of indoor toilets. Around the same time, my father arrived and asked what was going on, though he saw everything. Randy's wife pulled us away, and my father stood there, speaking animatedly with Randy. It was crazy. Point is, I learned he didn't like anyone going back there, and so my brother and I decided to go back there. This is where the present day story begins. It was a summer day, and the two of us were playing truth or dare. At some point, he dared me to jump into Uncle Randy's backyard. I was scared, but I didn't want to be weak, so I did it. I got back and dared him to go sit at the tree back there. He jumped over easily and ran over there. I followed him, giggling like a maniac, and sat next to him. We kept laughing about what he would do if he found us there, and while we were doing that, my fingertips rubbed over something. I looked down to see a root. I started digging it out, and my brother helped, but when he saw what it was, he screamed and jumped back. It was a tarantula, he said, shivering. And like any good big brother, I took the opportunity presented to help my little brother grow. He screamed so hard as I chased him with the tarantula that we heard rumbling coming from inside Uncle Randy's house. I remember saying, "Shit, let's get out of here." And my brother ran away and jumped over the fence. I followed him. We waited anxiously and giggled, but Uncle Randy never arrived that night. Personally, I had already forgotten about it when I woke up the following day. It wasn't until we were having breakfast that my mother walked in. She asked what was up with Uncle Randy. Apparently, the night before she'd seen him. He was digging out at his backyard. On the morning, she told our father to go help Uncle Randy, but when my father went to look out the window, there was no digging going on out there. Instead, the hole was completely covered up again. My mother was just talking about how she hoped it wasn't something too serious when we heard a knock coming from the door. It was Uncle Randy, and he was furious. He asked where we were, and that was when I remembered what I'd done the day before. The way his voice sounded was so angry, I realized that it wasn't a game anymore. My mother greeted him and asked what was the matter. He told her to shut the F up and bring us. My mother was shocked, to put it lightly. My mother asked what was going on, and he pushed her aside. That's when he saw us, and his eyes turned red. He said we went out to the back, didn't we? By then, I'm not going to lie, my legs were shaking like crazy. I've never seen him so furious before. I said no, and he screamed that we shouldn't lie to him. That's when my father arrived and asked what was all the noise about. My mother explained to him, then asked we tell the truth, though she was side-eyeing Uncle Randy's face. So, very slowly, I said yes, we were out there. This is what threw him over the edge. Uncle Randy attacked us. My mother screamed, but luckily my father jumped in time to stop him, knocking him onto the table. My mother screamed for us to run, while my father and Uncle Randy knocked over the table. We ran out and got to our room. I'm telling you,
My brother's face was white as paper. He was on the verge of tears and winced every time we heard another banging sound. He asked why was Uncle Randy so angry, and I had no answer. Instead, I decided to call the cops. I started dialing and called, but as I was waiting for the operator, my brother made a gargling sound and he fell over. I turned to see a yellow-orange yogurt on my brother's hands and on the floor. It was actually vomit. He pointed behind me and I turned to look. He was pointing at the tarantula on the table, except now that it had been out for some time, the ground had been blown off by the wind, and I could see now. The thing had human nails. It had human nails on its 5 fingers.